this for a long time.
Long time. I won't tell you how long.
Yeah,
Don't tell me how long you've been doing it.
We won't talk about number of decades.
Yeah.
But one of the questions that you and I hear all the time is, when is the best time to buy? And one of the things that we also hear in conjunction with that is, oh, I want to wait for interest rates to go down. I want to wait for prices to go down. In my experience, I rarely see that plan work for them. What do you think?
Well, we've talked a lot about even my stock brokerage days. I remember people trying to time even stocks, and what I have seen through the decades is that the markets punish people who are market timers. The reality is that nobody has a crystal ball, and that's why one of my mantras is, if you can, then do. So let's parse this thing right now. We all know that rates are not where we would like them to be. However, if you look at historically, rates for 30-year fixed they've averaged between 6 and 7%. But let's talk a little bit. So if you figure that right now has been a better time as far as the buyer being able to negotiate a price, and even in some instances, even like a seller credit, then for me, I look at it this way, and it's the new adage that seems to be running around, which is marry the property and date the rate, right? Nobody is going to keep this rate. I think personally in the next 12 to 18 months, inflation will start to slow and we'll start to see rates go down. Where? I think they'll be in the 4s. Are we going to see 2.5%, 3%? I do not think so. And the reason being is because those rates that happened at 2.5% and 3% were artificially lowered by the Fed as part of their QE or quantitative easing. It was part of that stimulus package. I just don't see that happening again. Do I see 4s? Absolutely. So,
and Ed, even at today's rates, those are still historical low rates.
They're still historically low, and here's what I say to those folks who say, well, let me wait till the rates go down. Okay, so let's walk this out for a second. So when rates come back down to the 4s, what do you think that's going to do to demand? What ends up happening? Then everybody comes out to play, which means now there's more demand, and what happens? Just simple economics.
And that's why that strategy does
not work, because you cannot time it that way. So what you do is, in the meantime, here's what I say. In reality, the higher rate gives you what? Gives you a greater tax write-off. Why? Because mortgage interest is deductible up to $750,000. So if you have a higher rate, technically you have less money you're paying the IRS, which is, I would think, one of everybody's goals, right? So in the meantime, which is the second part, is you might as well be building equity, because otherwise you're forfeiting it to your landlord. We all know that rents are going up. So in the meantime, do two things. One, take the greater tax deduction for the higher rate between now and when you refinance. And two, build some equity. Go out there, negotiate with the sellers, because they're a lot more willing to, because when they get 35 to 50 offers, they're not really that willing to negotiate anymore, because they know they're going to get over asking, because that's what that kind of high demand creates as far as atmosphere. And you've seen it.
Well, I think that, and I agree with everything that you've said. However, I find that when we get into the tax savings and those numbers, it goes over people's heads.
Yeah.
So I like to talk about affordability.
Yeah.
And we sit down with the buyer or the potential buyer. We pencil out, what are they paying for rent? What are they losing monetarily by not having that owner tax deduction? And then compare that to a mortgage payment, taxes, HOA if applicable, and back that into an affordable purchase price, which would be comparative to where they are as a renter. That becomes their baseline target purchase price, and maybe they have room to be flexible, to go upward or downward. But the best time to buy is when they can afford to get into the market.
That's why I say, if you can, then do. And to your point, leads me to this, which is, if you're even thinking about buying right now and you have not actually sat down with a mortgage professional to look at the numbers, that's the first thing I'm going to tell you, for two reasons. One, because it's not going to cost you anything, and two, it doesn't obligate you to anything, but it gives you a compass, right? It allows you to see where you're going. What is your number? Because numbers don't lie. And a lot of times when I'm doing that analysis with a client, I also like to involve their tax person so that the tax person can explain a $2,300 a month rent payment is equivalent to an X amount of a mortgage payment if you bake in what the tax deductions are going to be. Let the tax person say that, but they are a vital part of this formula because it's not apples to apples when you're talking rent to a mortgage payment.
So I think what is also important in that message is don't be afraid of the process. Don't be afraid of not knowing all of those details that your loan professional is going to know, your real estate professional, your Tax professional. Start the process. Have the conversation. Because that is going to reveal what you need to learn along the way.
Yeah, and in that process too, you want to pay very close attention to the type of person that you're working with. You want to have somebody who's more on the education and advice side than just trying to sell you a mortgage. That should not be the case. That person should be very advisory and education based to show you what your options are and not push you to make a decision. Only you can make that decision and feeling comfortable. Because look, I might be able to pre-approve you for $1 million, but maybe that's not your comfort level. Maybe your comfort level is 900, right? You got to factor that also into play because we're here to be advisors, not to be parents.
Well, and we're here to maintain those relationships long term.
Absolutely.
It's not a one-time transaction
100%.
for us.
And that's the other piece is that we're in this for the long game. We're here to help. We're here to advise, not to sell.
Agreed.